try this microphone, that's much better. So, hey, welcome everyone. I'm going to be very quick so you can go for lunch. So I'm not going to be the reason you will be late for lunch because I heard lunch starts during my talk also. Okay, so promised. What I'm going to talk today is, I named it here Serverless LLM Inferences for Everyone. And I wanted to share a little bit my experience because, now coming to the next slide, I'm working for Pulumi. My name is Engin Diri. I'm a customer experience architect at Pulumi, cloud transformation, all the stuff. You see some of my socials, feel free to follow me, or if you have any questions, you can always ask me. And yeah, in my role, obviously, we have now plenty of customers who jump on the whole AI stuff. So probably you're also working on some AI projects, or you know somebody in your company who started to evaluate and to see. And the same thing happens also at Pulumi because we provide infrastructure for, not providing the infrastructure, but giving the means in the hand of the customers to create then infrastructure. They may then run also some LLMs on it. So a topic which is actual for us, which is very important. And actually, I made already a similar talk one, because as we see, it was during Civo Navigate Austin. It was how to Skynet your Kubernetes cluster with local AI, because it was also driven from our customers. So it's really interesting to see how the story continues. And at this time, we had, let me come to this, so AI was at this time even more at the beginning, and big companies, they are like, hey, what we can do, and the imagination was, and this is a slide I took from my Austin talk, like, yeah, this is the future, this is how the future is going to look like. And then we saw also all the announcements coming up from OpenAI. We got, what was the name, Zorena, where they made videos, and it was really nice. All the cloud providers started to provide now some of their own LLMs, Amazon also, and then we got Facebook and all the stuff. And one of the points which leads also now to the second thing, running serverless LLMs, was the reasons here to use open source LLMs. So I really would like to go quickly through some of the points I mentioned at the beginning of the year, which are still valid. So the clicker is not working, so I'm going to click here. So some of the reasons why our customers asked for open source LLMs was they wanted to handle the costs better. So for them, it was a point to say, okay, maybe it makes sense to not use any of the providers, because we want to reduce any costs for the amount of tokens we generate and all the stuff. Again, we're talking beginning of the year. Things are really evolving quickly in the whole space. Another point why customers reached out was privacy. So there were concerns about privacy, to say, okay, what happens with the data when I send them to an proprietary LLM? Are they going to use this to train? I'm 100% sure that we eliminate any informations before we sending them out. And yeah, that was a question for companies. Transparency was a big thing here. The black box terms, so where does the model get trained? Is it already biased? And do I get really the answers I would like, or is it already influenced? So this was some of the questions. And then avoiding vendor login. And then people started also to run here, to use different LLMs also for benchmarking, for tests, because it was much cheaper. So, okay, this outlook from the last time, and then of course we had also some challenges here with open source LLMs, costs, latency, and operational burden. So the total ownership of costs is something people had to find out, okay, it's maybe not that easy. And what I presented there to give the people a choice was the thing between local AI, and then we have Olama and VLLM. So I decided then in Austin to make the presentation about local AI. Okay, so far the outlook from the last time, this was where people reached out and wanted to evaluate with this. And now we see now two different types here. We see proprietary LLMs, where we can say, okay, OpenAI, ChatGPT-4, Anthropic Cloud, developed by private companies. And yes, of course, they are often with state-of-the-art performance. and the access, yes, usually through API or cloud service. And then, of course, we have, as I mentioned before, the whole open source movement. Why do I get a calendar notification? Llama, Mistral, and all the stuff. And everything is publicly available. We can really see how it's trained. We can, it's community driven. So that's the point. And yeah, we can download everything. So we have with Hugging Face, for example, a huge access for different trained models. And then we can run it on our own infrastructure. So far, nothing new. And now I come back to the point why giving a talk about this already feels like the news from yesterday, because this space is moving really, really fast. So what I present here, what I talk here could already be obsolete, because you always have to keep update your stuff, because every day something new happens in this space. It's really amazing. And if you ever want to create your own startup, do something with AI. Venture capital is currently very easy to get if you have anything with AI going on. Okay, so far we see the difference, proprietary, open source, the motivation, why people would like to go into this way. So, of course, customers reach out again now. They had made already the experiences and has some additional questions. And this is going to be me again. So me as a Pulumi guy, I'm like, okay, let me help you. So the question we have now is, should we run serverless or dedicated LLM deployments? So that's a thing where customers are asking, because they found out one point, we'll go into some details of this, and then they see also some of the benefits, for example, with a serverless approach. So let's see now the table I had before, a little bit more now also with the different types of how things can get run. So we see again, on a serverless API approach, we have again proprietary solutions, again OpenAI, we have Anthropic, and then we see here we have to pay per use, and it's a managed infrastructure, easy to get started. So this is the point, and probably everybody played a little bit around with this, using LangChain or Llama Index to connect, or whatever library they are using. And then we see also in a serverless world, we see also here an open source approach, also with players like Replicate, Fireworks, who offers also a proprietary API, but using open source models. That's one thing. And then we go back again to our dedicated deployments. We have here Azure, OpenAI, AWS Bedrock, and all the stuff, so you can get control over the infrastructure for everything you need to keep your costs in scale. And then we have again the open source approach, where you, for example, AWS SageMaker or Kubernetes, that's really nice. And then you have full control again over everything. So here we have some of the options we can choose from. And then we come to the point we find out when we talk with the people is some of the key considerations to which approach we should take. So what we find out that interchangeability is a very important step for the people to understand. They find out, for example, if you use LangChain, most of the APIs settled down now on a generic view on the OpenAI specifications. So there are the endpoints you can already use. Yes, there are some little differences, but most of the time you can swap your code with one provider with another one. This is something they found very nice, so the interchangeability is a consideration factor. Another point we find out is easy of use. So most of the people really tend for a serverless approach, for example, for rapid prototyping at the beginning. They don't want to get bothered with any operational stuff. They say, okay, we're going to take a serverless approach because we don't have the capacity to handle any operational work, or we want to rapid prototype anything. So that's a thing for them, very important to say. We want easy of use, and then going, for example, for a serverless approach. And then there are some additional factors which may influence the decision what they're going to use. For example, data security and privacy. We had it with the local AIs again. So still a big thing. Bigger companies, large companies, German companies, for example, they hesitate with this and say, okay, is there a different way? I don't want to send any data out. So is there something we need and maybe run it dedicated or not using any serverless approach. Advanced customization. In my talk in Austin, I also made an example about extending your local AI because it's very cut off from a specific data trained model with additional informations from your own, like a RAG, retrieval argumentation. So adding PDFs, adding your Wikipedia to the stuff, and then people can ask clever questions and the system gives you a holistic answer about all your data. So that was really something. And then we have again the possibility to customize your model with all the informations, with all the data sources you have, could be a factor for any decision making. Predictable behaviors, that was also something to understand, okay, do we run into any rate limiting? How is the availability? So if we use a serverless proprietary approach where we can just consume, for example, OpenAI, what happens if they have a downtime? What is the situation? So is this affecting our business when we hit, for example, a rate limit? This is something which also influences the decision making. And then also the GPU availability. So what systems do we have? Can we get access to them? So there are many, many ways to get access for GPU. Ultimately, now we come another point is we are not an NGO and most customers are not working and money is a thing. So at the end of the day, it boiled again down. So these are some of the points we saw. Yes, they make sense, privacy and all the time, but then it's money. So there is a detailed cost analysis going on to say, okay, so let's see one of the things. Yeah, we know privacy. So if there's a strong privacy and we have a strong compliance, then maybe, yeah, we cannot never use something like a serverless approach from OpenAI, for example. But if we keep this still open and say, okay, let's see, in a serverless approach, we're going to pay by token. So I made the math here now to say, okay, how does it look like now for GPT, for example? So this is the actual prices. So I just checked them up this morning again to be 100% sure. So we see with the latest model, we pay for 1 million input token and output tokens, we pay a specific price. You get it for 1,000 or for 1 million. So if we make the mathematics, we say, okay, if we have 10 million tokens, this is the assumption we're going to do, we got $50 for input token and we got 150 for output token, so we get a monthly cost of $200 if we're going to use, for example, the serverless approach from GPT-4. You can check with different vendors how they have the prices, but this is something currently with OpenAI. But then if we go for a dedicated way and say, okay, this is maybe 200, that looks expensive, and we even expect more because we're offering a service which is heavily used and so on. So let's say dedicated hosting our own model. So let's see how infrastructure costs there. So I just looked up here the AWS one. And this is, for example, depending on what model, here's some assumption to say, okay, the size and all the stuff and what we're going to need as a GPU, for example. How does it cost us the price per hour if we're going to use a GPU-powered instance on AWS? And we see already having the A100, for example, underneath. These are really potent machines. And then you see the price. So let's make also here the math and say, okay, let's take Llama 3 and run it here on a A100 GPU. And now assumption again, we say, okay, let's assume that we approximately 2,000 to 4,000 tokens per second. So, and then we're processing here 1 million tokens, takes time around 250 and 500 seconds. And assuming the cost is $4 per hour and taking the midpoint 375, now we come of a cost around 0.416. And now we assume also that we have 500 concurrent users. So there's some assumptions going on, depends again on your stuff. But the most important path is here to say, okay, if we have all the settings up and we're going to use a 6 to 13 GPU instance using an A100, we would have approximately with these settings a cost per hour of 25 to 52. And this is something, yes, okay, now it makes again sense to say, yeah, here in this case, from a cost perspective, it may be, and now come to the point, maybe less expensive to host our own model. Okay, but now comes also the point, another downside, because there is nothing like a free lunch in everything, and whatever people saying, everybody has maybe their own agenda. There's also some performance things we need to consider when we self-host our LLM. So there are some folks who made, and this is really, I did not make the tests the people did, so I'm really relying here on the test results. So they made some tests with different models, and because I made the example with the Llama 3, I'm going to use the same results here. So we see now here the table, I hope it's visible from the back. We see now the average time with different backends where we're going to host this, so VLLM and all the stuff I mentioned at the beginning, and we see the users, user 10, user 50, user 100. And then we see here the average time for the first token to response. Then we have also here, coming here, the response tokens per second and the elapsed time, also with the different backends. But what we can see now from the graphic is that at high concurrency, 100 user, the best performing backend, and again, it could be that nowadays you already have a different backend which is even more high performant, achieves up to 4,000 tokens per second. And then we can see also from the data that as the number of concurrent users increase, the token generation per request tends to decrease. So, and also what I mentioned before, the time to first token, so this is a new metric to keep in mind, the TTFT, significantly improves with fewer concurrent requests, which makes absolute sense. With higher loads, certain backends may experience increased latency. So again, what we're going to choose has an impact, and we need to make the tests. And now we come again to the point, okay, I need to go up front. I need to make so much maybe tests. I need to find out if it's really better. Or I could say, because I have to deliver value to my customers, let's stick, for example, with OpenAPI, where it may be a little bit more expensive, but I don't need to think about all the stuff. I can maybe rely, depending on the contract and whatever you choose, that I have a consistent performance, because this is important for me. So, and now I'm already coming to the point, yeah, the hidden costs of self-hosting. So they call it the total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership. Okay, you get what I mean. So I mentioned this before, and we all know about this. Yes, DevOps time, setup, maintenance. It's not only installing it, go through your IDP backstage. Hey, there's a story. I can just drop this stuff. Somebody has to set up and maintain the stuff. So this could add up. You need special dedicated persons, maybe with the knowledge. Monitoring, alerting, everything should be in place, because when your system is not available, then maybe everything which relies on it also breaks down. Costs of data transfer, storage, and potential downtime, as I mentioned, and redundancy costs. So as we see now, these are some of the points. I'm pretty sure you may have, depending on your workplace, other requirements or other cost factors, but these are some of the points. Okay, so, but not all is bad. Now comes the point, again, I come to the speed thing with Roadrunner. Things are changing. So we see now that both options, the serverless and the dedicated options, they go cost-wise, go down. So this is something we can see. So API providers are constantly reducing their prices, because the evolution on their side also continues. So I come up with the graphic here with the evolution of the cost. So we can see now here on July of this year, the prices are significantly cheaper for the amount of tokens you can get as at the beginning or in April last year. So we can also see here that things getting much, much cheaper with the time. So again, what happens and how does it continue? Okay, and then we see also, we recently heard also about the whole NVIDIA stuff and providing the GPU and having special contracts. We see that GPU hardware is also becoming more and more efficiently and more affordable. And last but not least, projects, the backend projects we could maybe use, they're becoming also more and more efficient. So it could be that the latest iteration of VLLM is already better or has some of the things removed which may be limiting when you did your tests with it. And yeah, sorry, I had to put the spaces back again. The open source models improving in quality, potential reducing. So because when we did the local AI test, it was really horrible, the speed. I made the example, I run it here on the Civo hardware, and it's not because Civo hardware was not powerful enough, it was just that they are really, really slow sometimes because the way they created it. Okay. So coming back to what our customers use. So again, yes, they could run it on an EC2 instance, but what we saw, what our customers most like and really went for this because they want to have a flexibility, they want to self-host the applications. We saw, and I'm sorry again because I'm on a Civo Navigate, AWS. So AWS is our main customers. The majority of our customers are running on AWS. And they settled down for EKS, obviously, so everybody who goes to this road, they prefer the Kubernetes way. And we saw an increase, oops, where's the plus? An increase usage of Carpenter. So people really dig the Carpenter way. Carpenter is an open source project. I think it's also donated to the CNCF, so highly recommend for the Civo people also to think about a provider for this. So Carpenter was heavily used here, and I put here, now I will go into detail. So this is the code part. I'm working for Pulumi, so think maybe a little bit more YAML-y on this approach, but this is here now an example from our Pulumi code where we run Olama on one way. So here we have the definition now of a node pool. I will give it in more detail. So we define our node pool in Carpenter. We then give it a special intent. Here in this case, I named it Olama LLM. And then, coming to the second point, I can now choose, as you can see, use spot instances, for example, so getting the cheapest instance, which is currently available. I could also go for a dedicated one, and then using here a G5 2x large, you saw the spec at the beginning, and then also here the architecture and so on, so I can define this now. Carpenter will take care, and the only thing I need to do now, in this case here for the deployment of my Olama, I say, hey, please deploy this Helm chart on specific nodes with the intent Olama LLM, and then it will spin up needed new nodes because I defined everything with Carpenter. So that's the approach. I mean, you could also run them on a single EC2 instance. You could run it on RunPod, for example. I mean, there are different ways to do this, but our customers who are on the AWS world and have this AI case, they really settled down here on the Carpenter approach. And I can really understand why, because it's that easy, and Carpenter takes care to provision, deprovision, depending on the workload. So there are some magic going on here. Okay. I promised you I want to go quickly through. So conclusion, yeah, you may have understood. It depends. You know, that's really the thing. So I have hard times to make here the kingmaker to say, hey, go this way, go this way. There are, as you see, things to consider to say, okay, let's go the serverless approach, or let's go for a dedicated hosted one, and then you see the options you have on the hosted one, on Kubernetes, on EC2 instances, or whatever your cloud provider is. So it depends. As I mentioned before, it could be possible that serverless option is good for you because it has an ease of use, and you can use it maybe for rapid prototyping, or your organization has limited DevOps resources and you're like focused on delivering the value for the market. As I meant, the interchangeability, you could just quickly change the API endpoint if you want to go for a local one, which is very important, that the AI offerings are settled down on a standard that makes things hopefully more portable. Or you can go for a dedicated deployment if you need greater control, customization of options, or you fear of significant costs and you want to do savings at a scale because your system is like this. And I know that this is very unsatisfying for everybody who maybe accepted some clearer answers, but hey, if you're in the business, you know it all depends. And with this, I would open for Q&A, even if the Q&A table is not up. And yes? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This was a great talk. I am curious. Like we learned a lot about cost today, but I think most of the end users have a different concern, and that's data privacy, right? And as you say, it's so dynamic that it's not only changing with the cost and models and performance, but it's also a little bit out of transparency when it comes to data privacy. So, as Pulumi, you are recommending some solutions to your customers, to your partners, and when they have concerns with the privacy of their data and all the leak that we already experienced with LLM, so what is your communication strategy? How do you define it, and how do you make sure that they feel confident with the data they use in their IAC solutions?
I mean, again, thanks for the question. In our role, most of the time they already did the compliance internally. They made the discussions for this. What we can do, and this is good practice, not because we have to do this, but we want to have a good partnership with our customers, is to show them this and say, okay, you want to go this way, let's create an architecture around this, but this would mean, yeah, you're going to transfer probably data to a proprietary AI. Are you aware of this? And if they say, yeah, that's fine, then it's okay. So this is something they may already do the due diligence before they decide, especially German companies, they do this very, very much at the beginning. If not, we just mentioned this, for example, but yeah. Okay, so if there are no other questions, then I will go now. So thank you a lot and have a nice day and good lunch.